Greetings, Starfighters. Before we get to introing the movie, obviously this is a dye job, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it for a little bit just to say, don't use the brand that I did. I mean, it looks good. It's gotten a lot of compliments. In fact, I think I might make this sort of a birthday tradition. My birthday was several weeks ago from when I'm recording this, and I just decided to do something silly, and it worked out pretty well. Like I said, I might make it a new birthday tradition to go purple. I'm just not going to use Splat again. Splat was the brand that was for this. This bleeds a lot. I will still get dye under my fingernails if I run my hands through my hair without thinking. Again, this is like more than 3 weeks later now. And the thing is, I paid like 13, 14 bucks for that. When last year I went redhead for a little bit. I got that at a dollar store. And that stopped bleeding out and like getting on things after like one shower. So yeah. So yeah, just don't use Splat unless you really only plan for it to be like super temporary or something. Anyway, next movie. I'm a little unsure what the title of this movie is, actually, because I just sort of assumed it was just The Killing Machine, and it happens to be starring Dolph Lundgren. And it's also his directorial debut. But, according to the back of the DVD here, the actual title of the film, they have it in the quotation marks and everything. It's not The Killing Machine, it's Dolph Lundgren is the Killing Machine. What? I mean, granted, there's nothing inherently wrong with putting an actor's name in the title. I have not actually seen JCVD, but I heard it was pretty good. There's a movie where Jean-Claude Van Damme plays himself and he ends up a hostage in a bank robbery. I do still want to see that. I wonder if that's available on Netflix. No, I'll look that up later. So, once this video portion ends, I will be talking about either The Killing Machine or Dolph Lundgren is the Killing Machine. So, I've now watched The Killing Machine. I guess the DVD was just misleading. Wouldn't be a first on this show. Although for some US DVD releases of this movie, it's called Icarus. I'm just going to say this up front so that it doesn't interfere with the flow of the episode. I was wrong. Dolph Lundgren does not play himself in this movie. Plot summary, courtesy of Wikipedia, trimmed down from the original summary for time. There were those who called him Icarus. Everyone else knew him as a divorced father working for an investment company. But they didn't know his other side, his dark side, because Icarus was at his best when he was killing people. For years he'd worked as a sleeper agent in America, but when the Soviet Empire collapsed, he found himself in a foreign country with no one to trust. Determined to break from his dark past, he started over with a new identity. When a sudden mishap in Hong Kong blows Icarus's identity, past and present collide, and the assassin realizes he is now the target. The people that want him dead will stop at nothing to get him, and that means going after what he cares about most. Fighting for his life, Icarus is forced to face the demons of his past to protect the loved ones in his present. The movie does not waste time getting to the action, which, let's be real, is what we're all here to see if we're watching a movie called The Killing Machine, starring Dolph Lundgren. However, it's marred pretty quickly by several unnecessary freeze-frame shots. This opening action sequence is pretty brief. It involves some voiceover, and Lundgren's character taking out a few guys who were getting ready to kill him before jumping into the opening credits, which only confused the issue of this movie's title further for me, because the title sequence does imply that Dolph Lundgren is the Killing Machine is the title the way the DVD did, even though Letterboxd says it's just the Killing Machine, and whatever. What's amusing about this credit sequence are how a black and white still of Dolph Lundgren appears next to every actor's name in the title sequence. Playing over this is a song that I'd say fits the definition of butt rock. If you don't know off the top of your head what butt rock is, if you've heard a song by Nickelback, Stained, Theory of a Dead Man, Three Doors Down, or Five Finger Death Punch, then you've heard butt rock. Anyway, after the butt rock song, we enter the movie with text on screen saying it's 5 days before the event, brief as it was, from the pre-credit sequence. And we have a sex scene, featuring one of the lamest simulated BJ scenes I've encountered this side of any movie Diamanda Hagen has reviewed, that is interrupted by a phone call from Dolph Lundgren's character's ex-wife. It goes from there to the first hit job of the movie, set up with some voiceover exposition over some less than stellar editing. The movie's only about 6.5 minutes in, though, so there's room for improvement, but it's not a good omen that I'm seeing a lot of the same odd camera angle and scene cut choices that I took issue with in Streets of Blood. Take, for instance, the use of camera blur in this part of the movie, which is the Hong Kong mission referenced in the plot summary. Obviously, this is supposed to mask when something is being done by Lundgren's stunt double instead of Lundgren himself, though he's clearly in impressive shape for a guy who was in his 50s when this was being filmed. But the fact that I was able to notice it without replaying the scene, that's not good editing. When done well, those kinds of things become almost seamless, and are really only spotted after multiple viewings, well, unless you watch a fuck ton of these kinds of movies and already know what to look for. Anyway, after this, there's some fairly stock drama involving the ex-wife and forgetting a kid's school play, pretty standard stuff. If the two of them aren't back together when the movie ends, it'll either be a clever subversion of the genre's tropes, or she'll be dead. During this, though, I noticed a thing that I will absolutely give the movie credit for. There's a recurring thing throughout the movie up to this point, and spoiler, it continues after that as well, where Lundgren would put a cigarette in his mouth, but never light it. This happens several times, but the movie doesn't actually call too much attention to it. This pays off when, later on, while talking to a character named Serge, Lundgren's character says that he's quit smoking. Setup, reminder, payoff. Well done. Not super in your face, and all in the first act, too. Kudos. At about the half-hour mark, the main plot really kicks in when a group of assassins dressed as construction workers try to ambush Lundgren's character. It fails, of course, but points to him not making the fight a curb stomp, like many 80s and 90s era action stars insist on doing in their later films. Lundgren actually has to work for it. Let's see Steven Seagal put that kind of effort into, anything these days, let alone his action scenes. He gets home in time to save his daughter and her nanny from another group of killers. I was pleasantly surprised she made it out alive. In any other movie of this type, she'd have been dead well before they got to the car to drive off. Though this is before the halfway mark of the film, so we'll see if she makes it all the way. Lundgren tries to go underground, planning to bring his ex and daughter with him, since whoever is after him would likely try to kill them too, even if he was already dead. Along the way, he goes to see Serge, believing that Serge might have been the one who set him up, but the assassins come along and kill him too, but not before he gives Lundgren the name of the man who set up the bogus hit that he was leaving for when he was ambushed. He escapes those assassins too, and goes to get his ex as well as her new boyfriend, and to his credit, he tries to save that guy too, though that ends about as well as you'd expect. A shame, really. Would have been an interesting subversion, as I mentioned earlier, to have the movie end with his ex alive but not getting back together with him. Though that part could still happen. After this sequence, Lundgren passes out in the back of the car while his ex is driving. Again, this is something that most washed-up action stars would never allow in their later films, showing actual weakness. Because at this point in the movie, Lundgren's character has taken quite a beating. Since the men who killed the ex's boyfriend were dressed as cops, she makes the surprisingly rational call to not drive to the nearest police station, choosing instead to take Lundgren to a small motel, where after he wakes up, she demands he tell her everything. Not sure if it was intentional on the part of the writer, but this might be an inversion of a trope I really only noticed last year, after happening to watch a YouTube video about it. The kidnapping a woman for her own safety trope. While not inherently bad on its own, when it ends up in a romance in the movies where it happens, it does feel a little hinky. Luckily, that's not what we have here, though this scene does go a little too long. And it ends in sex. Well, that was quick. Them getting to the sex scene, not the... Now, given that they've both just been through a lot and emotions and adrenaline are clearly running high, the act itself doesn't bother me within the context of the story. The way it's shot, on the other hand, that does bother me. Filming this like a romantic scene was a mistake, in my opinion. The music, the camera work, all that, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. I'm not a filmmaker myself, so I can't say with any certainty what Lundgren, as director, not as lead, and the editors should have done, but I do know that it didn't work for me as a viewer. Once that's over with, Lundgren's character spills to his ex about his past, which was pretty much covered in the plot summary, though he goes into more detail here. I do like how Lundgren doesn't sugarcoat the things he did as a contract killer. Lots of movies of this type always try to downplay it. You know, having the assassin protagonist say things like they only ever killed bad people, that they never killed women or children, stuff like that. Sometimes it works, but it usually doesn't. The Replacement Killers is actually a really good example of this. If you haven't seen The Replacement Killers, by the way, it's really good. I recommend it. After this, Lundgren goes to confront the man he's been told is behind the contract on his life. But when he gets to the man's home, he finds the man's henchman already dead. Okay, didn't see that coming. I hope this twist pays off. Oh, and it does. The guy who put out the contract is also dead. Lundgren's voiceover at this point really sells it when he says, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I'll admit this is sort of the same as the crooked DEA agent from Streets of Blood, who was set up as an antagonist but then killed off fairly quickly. But the execution, no pun intended, here is much better. It comes much later in the movie for starters, and while the dead guy, Turk is what he's called, is name-dropped, it's not done so in a way to suggest that he's supposed to be the bad guy of the movie, just a bad guy. So it's less unsatisfying when he gets off-screen I might add, before our protagonist can get to him. Andy's right, as his friend from earlier in the movie tries to kill him, killing the nanny in the process, so yeah, the one woman of color in the cast is out. That's unfortunate. And sadly, Kerr, that's the friend, betraying Lundgren was telegraphed way too blatantly. A better way to do it would have been to have it look like Kerr had betrayed him, only to have her end up being the betrayed, by one of her own bodyguards or something. Maybe even taking a bullet to protect Lundgren's daughter or something. Oh well, at least it wasn't a complete ass pull, so I'll give the movie that much credit. It was predictable, but it wasn't stupid. During the fight, Lundgren is able to kill Kerr thanks to a distraction by a sudden appearance from a SWAT team or something, though the impact of that is lessened by the distracting use of slow motion during the kill. Well, first-time director. The team of armed men take Lundgren and his family, and we learn that they are apparently CIA. We also learn that Lundgren's character had been brought into the Russian mob by a friend of his who the KGB had ordered him to kill, but he turned on the officers who gave the order instead to save his friend. After the two got to America, they went their separate ways, and by sheer happenstance ended up in competing crime syndicates, and now Lundgren's character is the only one left of his. Meaning his old friend was the one behind everything. Well, older friend, not Kerr. This actually works. We'd seen flashes of the incident being discussed in this scene earlier in the film, popping up on screen for a second or even less, while Lundgren was working out in his home gym. At this point, the CIA agent talking to Lundgren basically tells him to finish off the other cartel for them, and they'll get him and his family somewhere safe. Shady as fuck, but the movie doesn't sugarcoat that, and at least it remembers that the CIA is not allowed to operate on U.S. soil. We all know they do anyway, but officially they aren't supposed to. Weaponizing someone's revenge is not nice, to put it mildly, but there are worse things they could have done. And have done. But this is not that kind of show. This all brings us back to the start of the movie. Though mercifully, the fight replays without the freeze frames, and looks much better as a result. Also turns out that a large chunk of the middle of the final battle was cut out in the opening, though that makes sense. Don't want to give away the whole ending at the start of the movie, after all. The action scene overall is pretty good. I've seen better, but I've also seen worse. Way worse. Way, way worse. Sometimes even for this show. Anyway, the battle ends with Lundgren's old friend being dead, and the last surviving henchman happening to be the guy whose life that Lundgren had saved in Hong Kong, the event that set this whole plot in motion. Said henchman repeats to Lundgren the words that Lundgren had said to him in that sequence and lets him go. We cut from there to Sioux City, Iowa, by which I mean Canada, because this was filmed in Canada, with Lundgren teaching his daughter French while his ex is pregnant again. So this is obviously more than a few months later, and yeah, they got back together, so that trope was carried through to its conclusion. Oh well. They spot a van on the other side of the street, some ominous music plays, the ex, well, ex-ex I guess at this point, says not again. Lundgren says pack a bag, and credits. Okay. I mean, a happy ending would have been cliched as fuck, I guess, but I'm not sure I like this the family stays on the run forever ending any better, but well, here we are. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. The old cliche of man is a horrible father because he doesn't quit his job to play with his kid full time. Like, I get that some people care more about their job and their family, but the problem with this trope in film is that often, if the parent or parents weren't working, that kid wouldn't be able to have the fairly comfortable life that they have. Again, referring to movie worlds here, I know that real life is way more complicated, don't at me. A commenter on Letterboxd said the movie had really bad sound editing. They must have gotten a bad copy because it sounded fine on my end. I mean, not that the sound was stellar, but it wasn't bad enough for me to notice. The scene where Lundgren initially believes his daughter is dead was probably his most well-acted scene in the whole movie. I wish he'd sold his part as well for the rest of the film. I might have enjoyed it more. Which brings us to the final verdict. If I gave out 10 scale scores on this show, I'd give this one a 6, maybe a 7 out of 10. Above average. Nothing particularly egregious about it. Even the editing choices I didn't like have the benefit of showing up less often than they did in Streets of Blood, though reminding me of that movie is something no film should ever do. Except maybe insofar as to make me go, well, hey, at least it was better than Streets of Blood. But there's not that much good I can say about it either that I didn't already say. There are some very good parts of this movie, but the fact that I was able to point out pretty much all of them in this episode and still keep it under 20 minutes shows how few and far between they were. Definitely the best movie of the set so far, but I wouldn't put it ahead of any of the number ones from previous seasons. Maybe ahead of the number twos from previous seasons? I'll have to think about that more. Anyway, just a note, because of this whole COVID-19 thing and the incompetence of President Rapey McTinyhands leading to us living through the stupid version of The Stand, the next video will not have a video portion. It is going to be audio only. So we'll be skipping the me before watching the movie part, which really sucks because I had a whole bit planned for this, but my camera person, well, my mom, she turns 60 this year, so she's in the high-risk group for COVID-19, and I work at Amazon, so there's always the slight risk of exposure there, so yeah, and it'll probably also be audio only for the season wrap-up episode too. That's less disappointing because I didn't actually have any bits planned for that one, but still, just letting everybody know what the deal is.